There are moments when the soul speaks before the mind is ready to listen, not with noise, not with fear, but with a quiet weight that settles deep inside your chest. You feel it when everything looks fine on the outside, yet something inside you feels unsettled, restless, slightly heavy. This is not imagination. This is not weakness. This is your spirit signaling that something important is being ignored. And the danger is not what you are facing, but what you are choosing not to face. When spiritual warnings are ignored, they do not disappear. They sink deeper, waiting, shaping your emotions, your decisions, and eventually your destiny. Many people believe suffering begins with visible problems, broken relationships, financial loss, emotional collapse. But spiritual suffering begins much earlier, in silence. It begins when intuition is dismissed, when inner discomfort is rationalized away, when the soul keeps knocking and the mind keeps saying, later. This delay is costly, and the spirit is designed to guide, protect, and align you. When ignored, it doesn't stop working, it starts weakening. And a weakened spirit does not scream, it slowly loses clarity, strength, and direction. You may notice it first as exhaustion that rest cannot fix, a loss of passion for things you once cared about, a growing numbness toward joy, purpose, or connection. These are not random feelings, they are symptoms of spiritual neglect. When you ignore what your spirit is urging you to address, boundaries, truth, healing, separation, obedience, you create internal conflict. And internal conflict, left unresolved, turns into inner suffering that no external success can heal. The spirit thrives on alignment. When your actions contradict your inner knowing, something fractures inside you. You may still function, you may still smile, you may still succeed, but beneath all of it, your spirit grows tired of carrying truths you refuse to acknowledge. This is why people can appear strong, yet feel empty, why they can be surrounded, yet feel alone, why they can pray, yet feel disconnected. Ignoring the spirit doesn't destroy you immediately, it slowly disconnects you from yourself. This message is not meant to scare you, it is meant to awaken you, because spiritual suffering is not punishment, it is a signal that something within you is asking to be honored, corrected, or released. The longer you delay, the heavier the burden becomes. And if you continue to ignore it, the suffering won't come from the outside world, it will come from within. This is the beginning of that realization, and what you do with it next will determine whether your spirit weakens or finally begins to heal. There is a sacred intelligence within you that speaks long before consequences arrive. It does not shout, it does not argue, it simply knows. This inner voice is the language of your spirit, and it often speaks through unease, hesitation, or a quiet resistance that doesn't make logical sense at first. When you ignore it once, nothing dramatic happens. When you ignore it twice, it grows quieter. But when you repeatedly silence it, the spirit does not disappear. It retreats. And in that retreat, clarity fades, discernment weakens, and confusion begins to take its place. Ignoring your spirit trains you to distrust yourself. You begin second-guessing instincts that were once sharp. You start needing external validation for decisions you used to feel confident about. This is not coincidence. The spirit is designed to be your internal compass. When you override it often enough, you lose your sense of direction, not suddenly but gradually. And one day you wake up wondering how you ended up so far from the version of yourself you once recognized. The most dangerous part of ignoring spiritual nudges is that life continues to move forward. Responsibilities pile up. Relationships demand energy, distractions multiply. You convince yourself you'll deal with that inner discomfort later when things slow down, but life rarely slows down, and the spirit does not wait forever. What was once a gentle whisper becomes emotional heaviness. What was once clarity becomes anxiety. What was once peace becomes restlessness. This is the cost of postponement. Many people mistake spiritual suffering for mental fatigue or emotional stress. But there is a difference. Emotional stress comes and goes. Mental fatigue can be wrested away. Spiritual suffering lingers. It follows you into quiet moments. It shows up when you're alone. It makes success feel hollow and comfort feel temporary. This suffering is not caused by what you lack, it's caused by what you're ignoring. And no amount of distraction can permanently silence it. Your spirit suffers most when truth is avoided, when you stay where you no longer belong, when you keep tolerating what drains you, when you silence convictions to maintain comfort. Each compromise leaves a small fracture inside you. Individually, they seem manageable. Together, they create a deep internal misalignment. And alignment is the oxygen of the spirit. Without it, you may still survive, but you will not feel alive. Spiritual disconnection rarely announces itself. It slips in quietly, disguised as adaptation. You tell yourself you're just being realistic, just being strong, just doing what needs to be done. But beneath that resilience, something essential is being suppressed. The spirit was never meant to be managed or muted. It was meant to be heard and honored. When it is ignored for too long, it doesn't rebel, it withdraws, and withdrawal is far more dangerous than resistance. When the spirit withdraws, life begins to feel mechanical. You go through routines without presence, conversations lose depth, moments that should bring joy feel strangely flat. You're not unhappy in an obvious way, but you're not fulfilled either. This numbness is not emotional failure, it is spiritual exhaustion. Your inner world has been carrying unresolved truth for too long, and now it's conserving energy, waiting to see if you will finally listen. A disconnected spirit often leads people to chase intensity instead of meaning. They seek noise to drown out silence, stimulation to replace fulfillment, productivity to avoid reflection. The more they distract themselves, the further they drift from their inner alignment. And the tragedy is that they believe they are moving forward, when in reality, they are running in circles, busy, accomplished, yet deeply unsettled. This is why ignoring spiritual signals often leads to repeating the same cycles, the same type of relationships, the same patterns of burnout, the same inner conflicts dressed in different forms. Until the root is addressed, the symptoms will return. The spirit remembers what the mind tries to forget, and it will keep resurfacing the lesson until it is acknowledged, not to punish you, but to protect you. Spiritual suffering deepens when you begin betraying your own values to survive environments that no longer fit you. You shrink your truth to keep peace. You tolerate disrespect to avoid loneliness. You suppress calling to maintain security. Each time you do, the spirit absorbs the cost. And while others may never notice the sacrifice you're making, your inner self feels every compromise. Over time, this internal betrayal becomes heavier than any external burden. There comes a moment when the spirit stops urging and starts enduring. Not because it no longer cares, but because it has been ignored too many times. This is a dangerous stage, not loud, not dramatic, but quietly heavy. You may still hear the inner voice occasionally, but it feels distant, less urgent, almost muted. This is not peace. This is the spirit conserving itself after repeated dismissal, learning to survive in an environment where it is not prioritized. At this stage, people often mistake numbness for strength. They say they've grown thicker skin, become more realistic, learned to detach. But true strength brings clarity, not dullness. True peace brings presence, not emptiness. When the spirit grows tired of waiting, it wraps itself in silence, not as a weapon, but as a shield. And behind that silence is deep fatigue from carrying truths you refuse to act on. This is when joy becomes conditional. You can feel okay when everything aligns externally, but the moment stillness returns, unease resurfaces. Quiet becomes uncomfortable. Solitude feels heavy. The spirit longs for alignment, but the longer misalignment persists, the harder it becomes to recognize what alignment even feels like. You start confusing comfort with peace, survival with purpose, endurance with fulfillment. A tired spirit often manifests through subtle despair, not hopelessness, but a quiet resignation. You stop expecting things to change. You lower your standards for how alive you're allowed to feel. You tell yourself this is just how adulthood is, how responsibility feels, how life goes. But deep down, something knows this is not the life you were meant to merely endure. and that knowing hurts more than any obvious loss. The most painful part of spiritual neglect is not what you lose externally, it's what you lose internally. The sharpness of intuition, the warmth of connection, the confidence of alignment. These losses happen slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day you realize you no longer trust your own inner voice. And when that happens, life feels uncertain even when nothing is wrong. Every time your spirit calls you toward truth and you hesitate, a cost is incurred. Not always immediately and not always visibly, but always internally. Obedience to the spirit is not about perfection, it's about responsiveness. When responsiveness turns into delay and delay turns into avoidance, the spirit bears the weight. It carries unexpressed truth, unmade decisions, and unresolved convictions, all of which accumulate quietly inside you. Delayed obedience often disguises itself as patience or wisdom. You tell yourself you're waiting for the right time or clarity, better circumstances, but clarity often follows movement, not waiting. The spirit speaks when alignment is possible, not when conditions are perfect. And the longer you postpone action, the heavier the inner tension becomes. This tension is not anxiety, it is misalignment pressing against your conscience. There are moments when your spirit urges you to leave, to speak, to stop, to change. Ignoring these moments doesn't freeze time, it allows decay. Staying where your spirit is no longer nourished drains vitality. Continuing conversations that diminish you erodes confidence. Repeating habits that conflict with your values weakens self-respect. Over time, you may not even remember why you once felt so strongly, only that something inside you feels tired and dim. A spirit burdened by delayed truth becomes heavy. This heaviness shows up as procrastination, emotional fog, and a lack of motivation that no external reward seems to fix. You may push yourself harder, hoping discipline will replace alignment, but discipline without purpose leads to burnout. The spirit needs honesty, not pressure. It needs acknowledgement, not suppression. The tragedy of ignoring spiritual nudges is not that you fail, it's that you slowly abandon yourself. Each unacted truth creates distance between who you are and who you are meant to be. And that distance is painful, even if you can't name it. The spirit does not demand immediate perfection. It asks for sincerity. It asks for movement. And when those requests are ignored long enough, suffering becomes the language it uses to get your attention. Spiritual suffering always leaves clues. It never arrives without warning. The problem is not that the signs are absent, but that they are subtle. You begin to feel disconnected from things that once grounded you. Moments of stillness feel unsettling instead of peaceful. Your reactions feel sharper, your patience thinner, your joy more fragile. These are not character flaws, they are signals. Your spirit is alerting you that something essential is out of alignment. Another sign appears in your relationships. You may feel drained around people you once felt safe with, or restless in environments that once felt familiar. Conversations feel forced, laughter feels delayed. It's not that everyone has changed, it's that your spirit is no longer at ease where it is being ignored. When you outgrow a space internally but remain there physically, spiritual tension is inevitable. You may also notice a growing resistance to things that require inner honesty, reflection, prayer, journaling, silence. These practices confront you with truths you've been avoiding. The spirit does not fear silence. Avoidance does. And when you consistently escape introspection, it's often because your inner self is holding something unresolved that is asking to be faced. Spiritual neglect often expresses itself as confusion about purpose. You may feel busy yet unfulfilled, productive yet directionless. You check boxes, meet expectations, and still feel something is missing. This emptiness is not a lack of achievement, it is a lack of alignment. Purpose flows naturally when the spirit is heard. When it is silenced, even success feels hollow. Recognizing these signs is not meant to shame you. Awareness is an invitation, not a condemnation. The spirit continues to signal because it believes you are capable of responding. Suffering intensifies only when awareness is ignored, but when recognized, it becomes a turning point. This is the moment where neglect can turn into attention, and suffering can begin transforming into understanding. There is a point in every inner journey where avoidance becomes impossible. Not because circumstances force you, but because your spirit grows too heavy to carry unspoken truth any longer. This is the moment when distraction stops working, when silence feels louder than noise, when you realize that continuing as you are costs more than change ever could. This moment is uncomfortable, but it is sacred. It is the threshold between suffering and transformation. In this space, the spirit asks for honesty, not grand gestures, not instant answers, but truth about what you've been tolerating, truth about what you've been avoiding, truth about who you've been pretending to be in order to survive. This honesty can feel like loss because it often requires releasing identities, relationships, or habits that once felt necessary. But what feels like loss is often liberation in disguise. Taking responsibility for your inner life is not selfish, it is essential. No one else can hear your spirit for you. No one else can carry the weight of your unspoken convictions. When you ignore them, the burden does not disappear, it settles deeper. But when you acknowledge them, even without knowing the next step, something begins to lighten. The spirit responds immediately to sincerity. This is where courage is required, not the loud kind, but the quiet courage to choose alignment over approval, truth over comfort, obedience over delay. The spirit does not demand perfection. It responds to willingness. Even the smallest step taken in honesty restores more strength than years of silent endurance. Many people wait for certainty before acting, but certainty often follows commitment, not the other way around. The spirit moves when you move, and the moment you stop pretending that everything is fine, the healing process begins, not instantly, not dramatically, but faithfully. What you face no longer controls you. What you honor begins to heal you. Healing begins the moment you stop ignoring yourself. Not when everything is fixed, not when answers are complete, but when attention replaces avoidance. The spirit does not require you to know the entire path. It asks only that you acknowledge where you are. This acknowledgement alone restores connection. What was once heavy begins to soften. What was distant begins to return. Alignment does not arrive with noise. It arrives with relief. When you listen again, the spirit does not punish you for the silence. It welcomes you back. There is no resentment in it, only readiness to guide, to strengthen, to steady you. You may still feel fear, uncertainty, or grief for time lost, but alongside it will be a quiet clarity you haven't felt in a long time. That clarity is not excitement. It is truth settling back into place. As alignment is restored, life does not suddenly become easy, but it becomes meaningful. Decisions feel cleaner. Boundaries feel necessary instead of cruel. Stillness feels safe again. The energy you once spent suppressing inner truth is now available for growth, creativity, and peace. This is the reward of listening, not perfection, but wholeness. Your spirit was never broken. It was burdened. It was waiting for attention, honesty, and respect. And the moment you begin to honor it, even imperfectly, it responds with resilience you forgot you had. This is why ignoring it caused suffering, because the spirit was designed to lead, not to be silenced. If you take nothing else from this message, take this. Your spirit speaks because it wants to protect you, not harm you. The suffering was never the goal, it was the signal. And now that you are listening, the signal has served its purpose. What comes next is not fear, not loss, not collapse, but alignment. And alignment is where strength, peace, and true healing begin.